Morning, beautiful people, or afternoon, whenever you're listening to this. Welcome to Chapter 2, Conditional Statements. So this is 2.1a. We're going to do 2.1b tomorrow. So here, introduction to conditional statements. Condition, if you clean your room, then you can go to the football game. You can only go out with friends if you did all your chores first. You know these. Your parents are full of these. It's what happens. It is an if-then statement that relates a hypothesis to a conclusion. So the hypothesis usually comes first. It usually follows the word if. So a clean room, all your chores being done. Those were all the hypothesis. And then the conclusion usually follows then. You can go to the football game. You can go out with friends, is the thing that happens after, right? It's almost like a cause and effect sort of thing. Circle the hypothesis and underline the conclusion. If we send exactly one Snapchat to each other every day, so the hypothesis, then we will have a Snapchat streak, underlined. The ground will be wet if it rains. So technically here, my hypothesis, if it rains, then the ground will be wet. It's just in a different order. The dog will bark if a stranger walks by the house. So if a stranger walks by a house, then the dog will bark. And then if the angle measures 130 degrees, then it is obtuse. So it doesn't matter where it's written for this. Hypothesis and conclusion doesn't matter where it's written. Some of these do matter. Okay, so rewrite each sentence as a conditional. So a conditional statement will always have an if and a then. Two angles that are complementary are acute. If two angles are complementary, then they are acute. Every single time you need both the if and the then. You can see this written a couple ways too, like if two angles are complementary, then the two angles are acute. I tend to write in shorthand because a lot of writing in this chapter and I'm lazy. You can get your driver's permit when you are 15. So the if part, I think it makes the most sense to have the if you are 15, then you can get your driver's permit. If you write it the other way, it's not a big deal, but this makes the most sense to me. If you are 15, then you can get your driver's permit. So again, I have my if, I have my then, I have a hypothesis and a conclusion. Okay, we have some definitions here. We have some things that you just need to know. We'll dive into them as we keep going throughout this chapter. So inductive reasoning makes a conclusion based on observations and patterns. Intuitive, I look, I watch. Inductive, I see, so I make a conclusion. A conjecture is a concluding statement reached, and then a counterexample shows that your conjecture is false. Let me tell you what I'm talking about here. So determine whether each conjecture. So it is a conclusion reached by using. So if you have a pet at home, then it is a dog. That is a conjecture. It is just a statement that somebody made using inductive reasoning. We know that that is not necessarily a true conjecture, right? That is a false conjecture. I know it's a false conjecture because maybe you have a cat. So if you have a pet at home, then you have a cat. Great. Means that it's not necessarily a dog, right? The product of two numbers is always larger than both numbers. All right, product, remember, is multiply. Usually that's true, right? So if you do, 2 times 3, you're going to get 6. So it's larger. I wonder if that's always true. What if I did 0 times 3? Is that larger than both numbers? Nope. What if I did a half times 10? It's 5. Not larger than both numbers. Those are all my counterexamples. I didn't need to. That one's a true example. These are counterexamples. Let me make that neater. So this is a false statement because we know that 0 times 3 is 0. Or a half times 10 is 5. So your answer isn't always larger than both the numbers. Vertical angles are never complementary angles. Vertical angles. Okay, vertical angles are the ones that are across from each other, right? So like this one and this one. Complementary angles add to 90 degrees. Well, what if I had two vertical angles that were 45 and 45? They're equal to each other. They're across from each other. Do they add to 90? They sure do. So this never piece means that this is false, and I have a counterexample. If you live in Vestavia, then you live in Alabama. I think that one's true. There might be a Vestavia in some other state that we are unaware of, but I'm not aware of it. So I'm going to say it's true. Google it. Get back to me. Okay. Now, we also have some ways. We have different types of conditional statements. So the one you get most often is this: if P, then Q. So if P, then Q. And to do this, we're going to hold both our hands out. If P, then Q. It is a conditional. It's what your parents condition your allowance on. Conditions. If you have this, if you have Miss Mayhew for geometry, then I am a freshman. That is a conditional statement. We have if, then, hypothesis, conclusion. Now, converse. Converse is a switch. I think of these like the shoes, and good basketball players can do opposite feet. I can't draw opposite feet, can I? Nope. No, I can't. It's like you switch your feet. So converse are the shoes, right? And good basketball players can do their feet backwards and forwards because Miss Mayhew can't draw feet. I'll get a picture up in there. And what this is it's if Q, then P. So all you have done here is switch the hypothesis and conclusion. So if I have Miss Mayhew for geometry, that is my hypothesis. Then I am a freshman. What we are going to do is flop the two of these. So if I am a freshman, then I have Mayhew for geometry. Now, this is no longer necessarily true, right? This top one was true. The second one, maybe not. If you are a freshman, then you might have Miss Hall or Miss Burris or Coach Edelman, like, right? But that is the converse statement. We still have, if I have Miss Mayhew for geometry, that was the conclusion. And here, no, that was the hypothesis, that's the conclusion. And they've switched spots. Okay, my inverse. What this is a Borat joke. Borat would make a comment and he would go, nah. So the inverse, what this little guy right there means is not. So if not P, then not Q. And all you're doing is making it the opposite, the inverse, adding not, essentially, like a Borat joke. So let's see. If I have Miss Mayhew for geometry, so instead of that, we're going to say if I don't have Miss Mayhew for geometry. So that's me adding a not. It's not technically a not, but you know what I mean. If I don't have Mayhew for geometry, then, so what the original one said is I am a freshman. So this is, we're going to not, then I am not a freshman. Again, we could come up with counterexamples. That is not necessarily true. Okay, so here's the Miss Mayhew for geometry piece here. Ooh, flip my colors. here's the Miss Mayhew for geometry piece. That was my original. And then here's the I am not a freshman piece. Same order as the conditional, but just flipped. This one, I flipped my hands upside down to make sure that you know it's the not. So, you know. And then the contrapositive, it is the longest word, so you have to do the most to it. You have to both not it and flip it. So it is read, if not Q, then not P. If you take your conditional, if I have Miss Mayhew for geometry, instead of going first, that's going to have to go second. It's also going to say if I don't have Miss Mayhew. So what's going to go first is this one. Then I am a freshman, but I need it to be not Q. So if I am not a freshman, then, and I take this top piece, I take the original hypothesis, I knot it, and I've moved it to the end. So if I am not a freshman, then I don't not have Mayhew for geometry. Now, again, these aren't necessarily true, right? Like, let's see. If I am not a freshman, that was in blue. That was my original conclusion. I don't have Miss Mayhew for geometry. That was my original hypothesis. I have knotted it. I've done it. I think we're okay so far. The blank is used, the little squiggly is used to negate, to not put Borat up in there. Not the statement. Meaning you want it to be opposite of the original. So it is raining, it is not raining. But if there is already a not, I can't play guitar. So the opposite of that would be I can play guitar. We do an activity as a group that if you are not here, you might want to redo on your own, pausing this video and checking your ideas. So we split up each one of these statements. So the original, if an angle measures not 80 degrees, then the angle is acute. And we practice writing the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive. We did this as a group in an activity, but it would be very helpful right now. Look over this example. I'll do it with you real quick. If an angle measures 80, then the angle is acute. Converse, you're a basketball player, flip them. So if an angle is acute, then it measures 80. Not true anymore, but that's okay. Inverse, not. So if the angle does not measure 80, so we added a not up in here, does not measure 80, then the angle is not acute. We added our not in there. We took this one and we inversed it. Contrapositive, longest word, do the most to it. So if the angle is not acute, then the angle does not measure 80. If you were doing this at home, pause, see this, try it yourself. Can you write the converse, inverse, and contrapositive? So if you are at a football game, then you will see coaches. Converse, switch them. Inverse, not them. Contrapositive, switch and not. Give it a shot. See if you get the same answers I did. If an angle measures 90 degrees, then it is a right angle. Converse, inverse, contrapositive. And last couple. This one's a little challenging. So if it is not raining, then I am wearing my Vans. Okay, so if it is not raining, converse, flip them. If I'm wearing my Vans, then it's not raining. All I did was flip. Inverse. That's my not one, right? But it says if it is not raining. So I'm going to change it to if it is raining, then I am not wearing my Vans. Contrapositive, flip it and not it. So take that inverse, put that here, take that, put that there. Double check yours. This one's hard because it's got a lot of negatives in it. Try it, see if you get it right. If you are not getting views, then your post won't go viral. Converse, switch them. If your post won't go viral, then you aren't getting views. Inverse, not them. So this time we're gonna just opposite them, right? If you are getting views, then your post will go viral. Contrapositive, both flip it and reverse it. If your post will go viral, then you are getting views. I think this is my last practice one. If you're a guitar player, then you are a musician. Converse, flip them. If you're a musician, then you are a guitar player. Inverse, not them. If you are not a guitar player, then you are not a musician. Contrapositive, flip it and reverse it. If you are not a musician, then you are not a guitar player. I hope that helps. Oh, I had one more. If you compete in the Olympics, then you are an athlete. Converse, switch. Inverse, not. Contrapositive, not and switch. Your homework is on Google Classroom. I would really like you to put in all your answers. So like italicize the hypothesis, underline the conclusion, show that each conjecture is false by finding a counterexample. So just list your counterexample. Here we are writing a converse, an inverse, and a contrapositive. Copy and paste, makes your life easier, is why this is on Google Classroom. Then think, are these true or false? Make a counterexample if that helps. Great, I hope that helps.